Well, welcome back to Sophomoros. This is another time for conversation with me and my cousin Kevin. I'm super excited, although a little frazzled about today's episode. We prepared for different topics.
Yes, we did.
At the end of the last episode of Bones Parade, we talked about how the next episode was going to be a movie review of a movie called Calvary. I watched the movie, but it's been a couple of weeks since I've watched it, and I watched it at night, and so now I'm, forgetting the details. And Kevin prepared to do another Bones Parade episode, so
Yep.
we're both a hot mess this morning.
Oh, it's going to be good.
I woke up this morning early. Kevin's recording early with me. I had to wake up early because I had to go get my bag from my work because I completely forgot my laptop and my iPad just at my work. I just forgot. And the funny thing is, last night I was there for an event, and I remember I drove home and then looked in my back seat, realized there was no bag, and thought to myself, shoot, I need that for tomorrow. So I turned around, I went back to the church, I looked for it, couldn't find it, and I was like, where's my bag? And I realized, you know what? It's probably in my apartment back at home. I probably forgot to bring it to the event tonight. So I went back home, looked around my apartment, went, holy crap, it's not there either. And I was like, did someone steal my bag? Where's my bag? And then this morning, I remembered where it was. So I have gone back and forth for this bag 4 times now.
Yay.
So that should kind of tell you where I'm at this morning. So please have mercy on us. So we are going to talk about Calvary this morning. Luckily, Kevin has watched it a number of times, and so there are parts of it that are kind of crystallized for him. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Kevin. I feel so bad.
My essay from college on this movie.
You should. That would be great. Yeah, you should pull that up. I didn't know you had written an essay.
I was a lot smarter when I was in college.
Me too, buddy. Me too. To give kind of an opening, kind of summary or a plot opening for the movie.
To give an opening, we should say...
oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you haven't watched it but you want to watch it, it's rated R for a reason.
Yes.
And it's not for violence. Most of it is for language and things you might need to look up in the dictionary and then regret.
Yeah, like me. I looked up a certain word that I didn't know. And it was one of those where I didn't leave the Google search page because I was like, yeah, I don't need to go any deep dive. I don't need to deep dive any further into this question. I think I got it. I'm going to move on. So there's a lot of I would say most of the references, the sexual references in this movie, are to make you uncomfortable. So go in with that in mind. They certainly made me uncomfortable. However, it does help towards building the world that the movie takes place in, that kind of sets the scene. So definitely a content warning on this one. If you're under 17, just don't watch it unless your parents are watching it with you. And if you're over 17, even still, maybe go in with some caution. But the overall kind of plot for the movie is that there is a Catholic priest who this is how the movie opens. There's nothing being spoiled here, but there's a Catholic priest who's hearing a confession, and the confession begins with a man saying how he was horribly abused by a priest, and he starts by basically saying, I'm going to murder an innocent priest. That will be my revenge, right? And he says something because if I murdered, I think the other priest had passed away at this point that had abused this guy when he was a kid.
Or it was just in a different town or community.
Or a different town. Yeah, but he was not satisfied with the idea of just taking vengeance on this guy. He thought that the only way to properly retribute what had happened to him or retribute, I guess would be the emphasis there. It was to take the life of an innocent priest because he was innocent when he was being abused, I imagine. I think that was the logic there. So this priest who's hearing the confession is now expecting to be murdered at some point, and like within the next week. And what's really interesting is at the very beginning, when he's making this threat, he actually says, like, I'll meet you at this place, and I'm going to kill you there, right? Like, and the whole time I'm kind of wondering, like, why is he not just fleeing? Like, why doesn't he just go to a different country or something, you know? Maybe the guy would have found him. Maybe it's, like, supposed to be, like, a bearing witness to his resolve to love his neighbor, that he's not going to, like, resist evil. He's not going to run from it. He's going to keep it. But what was your thought on why the priest didn't just run away?
I don't think it's in his nature to run away.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He does almost run away at the end.
Yeah.
He gets to the airport to get on an Aer Lingus flight out of Dodge, which is also, by the way, what his boss recommends that he do.
Right.
Is to leave.
Or report to the police.
Or report it to the police. And he does neither. And while he's there, my recollection is that he meets the lady that he'd had a discussion with earlier where her husband had died at the hospital.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, because that's the flight that they're also transporting the casket of that man on.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, that is a beautiful little sub story within it. So kind of the structure of this movie is it's tracing this priest's last week alive. At least in his expectation. He feels like he's going to die, like it was a credible threat. He does know who the man was. That's the crazy part of it, is he can he says, I remember him saying at one point, like, I know who I think threatened me. So it's not like he's in any kind of, like, there's no anonymity here. And so he's, like, walking through life. Now, you don't know, as the viewer, who it is until the very end. But he knows. And you're watching him live out this last week. And he meets all these people and is, like, having these conversations with people and these interactions and kind of trying to process through the interactions what he'll do. And I would say it is a masterpiece of a movie. It is one of those movies where it doesn't follow any of the scripts that you think it's going to follow. It keeps you guessing the entire time, and it paints a really beautiful picture of humanity underneath a very, like, realistic picture of what humanity is often like. A very, like, grotesque and uncomfortable look at human nature. So I loved this movie. Kevin, thank you for recommending this movie to me.
You're welcome.
Shall we just go ahead and spoil it? Like, I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to talk about it without spoiling it.
The movie actually spoils itself, which is kind of fun.
Go say more about that.
So, if I'm scrubbing through to see if I'm remembering this correctly. My recollection is when he goes and talks to his boss. Is that? Let me double check here. Never mind. I misremembered.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
We're both working on it here. So I think we should spoil it. Because I think there's no way to talk about this movie without spoiling it.
The butcher butchered him.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so you meet the character that will go on to kill the priest at the end of the movie. So he does die at the end. So that's the first spoiler, is he does die. And the second spoiler is it's a guy that actually I would say I was not threatened by during the entirety of the movie. I didn't feel like he was the threat. And
you weren't threatened by the guy whose first line in the movie, other than "Amen," is "decapitated two of them."
Oh, well, that was an interesting. I didn't spot that. That's good. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
When he's introduced, that's like.
Was he talking about?
I think I'm trying.
What
to
was
read
he
off
talking
the
about?
subtitles, but yeah. Let's see.
I mean, it's not off-brand for this movie to just throw in random dialogue, because it's like, it's very much trying to paint a picture that's realistic of
here it is.
These people's lives.
Here it is. Mad fella altogether. Mad fella altogether he was. Decapitated the two of them. There was blood all over the place. Hi, Father. You know.
Yeah.
The priest walks in. He walks in as the guy's telling the story to a different patron.
That's right. Butchering. Yeah.
That's basically what I mean by, like, they're not necessarily, but that's also kind of the humor of this, right? Like, there is a lot of dark humor with it, and knowing who it is, and then that's your introduction to him. It's like, oh yeah, duh, of course. But also, you're not going to, like, who would be that obvious with a movie like this, right? Like, who's going to make it the guy that's talking about butchering people and while he's, like, cutting meat being the murderer? That's just too on the nose.
Yeah.
So,
and he's kind of a I don't know, an upfront character. Like, he'll just kind of say what's on his mind. Seems pretty chill. And has very close interactions with the father, like, pretty regularly throughout the movie, which I would imagine would be like a tell, right? But maybe this actually reinforces the resolve of the priest, because he's not like he makes no reaction at all to this guy who he suspects will kill him later in the week.
And he actually counsels him and helps him through his life, just as he's always been doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, what you're talking about with the bruise on the eye, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's just he treats this guy the way he treats everyone in the movie.
Yeah,
even
pastorally.
though he knows this person's gonna kill him. No, it's one of his flock, and he's gonna keep going the way he has been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how would you describe as another detail, we're in Ireland, right? So this is like, that's where that was why you had the 5-star Irish accent there a second ago.
Not 5-star.
Not 5-star.
Oh,
but
no
that's
Irish
what people come to this podcast for, Kevin. They come here for movie reviews and 5-star Irish accents.
The reason I read it that way is because they actually spelled it that way in the subtitles.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, so how would you describe the overall personality? Like, give a couple of attributes that kind of help categorize what the priest is like.
I mean, he's definitely clever.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you lost hearing there.
No. If anybody can hear a lawnmower in the background, there's some guys
and I've
outside.
Got construction going on, so yeah.
Perfect. I'm like watching my waveforms, and they're just so high right now, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm so sorry for all the listeners who are like just listening to landscaping right now. Like, treat it like ASMR. It's like a bedtime noise, you know. I'll put you to sleep.
But yeah, anyway, so he's quite clever, and I think that's the both the good and the bad of him, as it were, right? Like, his cleverness puts him in almost a position of power with most of the people around him, where he has that wisdom of someone that's been doing what he's been doing for a long time, but he matches that with a certain edge that is his personal inherent cleverness, which I think is borderline intimidating for some of the people around him. They feel threatened by not just that he is spiritual, but that he has this mind paired with the spirituality. Because if you're a dumb priest, you can kind of discount them. Like, on a certain level, I can just put I go to church on Sunday in a bucket, because I'm not really, the priests will come around and they'll do their best, but they're, that's just their thing. They're not. That's
right.
Who they are. But I don't have to really worry or think about what they say beyond the interactions I have with them, or what they say in the pulpit because there's no actual weight behind it. But this guy, he's got enough of a mind where you're like, well, damn, I kind of have to listen to what he says, because not only does he have this spiritual wisdom, but he's got a brilliance behind there as well.
Yeah.
It's clear that he's actually thought about this and about me, and I really want to discount it and do my own thing, but I kind of can't, and people don't like that.
Yeah, okay, so maybe a good analogy for this would be just like the good coach or the good dad, where you're like, you want to get away with something, but you almost, like, I used to do this when I was a kid. I still do this with my dad sometimes, where like I'll know something is like a little risky, or like is not necessarily maybe the most ethical course of action, and I'm pretty resolved to do it, but then I'm like, I kind of want to talk, like I almost have this inner urge to talk to somebody like, like this priest, where I'm like, but what are you gonna say? That like, what am I lying to myself about here? That I'm, and I think that's the role he plays. That's very astute. He has that kind of like, I'm going to tell you the truth vibe about him, or at least I'm not going to let you lie to yourself, right? I'm going to make my silence so loud that you and I both know what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah.
Well, and part of this, I think, is because this is Europe, and if you haven't spent time in Europe in a sort of like faith or missions capacity before, you may not realize. Yeah, I did a missions trip there at one point, not Ireland, but a lot of Europe is this way, where there's the trappings of Christianity, and there's a lot of I think a lot of Europeans would be considered not Christian and simultaneously know more about the Bible than a lot of Protestants in the U.S.
Yes.
Because so much of the Bible is ingrained in like their government and politics and laws and philosophy and thinking, and so they can't. And there's like churches that are really obviously churches. It's not just like in a high school or something. Like, this is a building that is clearly a church, and they're like all over the place, and they've been there for centuries, usually the young ones, and centuries upon centuries for the old ones. And so you can't escape the trappings and history of faith, and yet faith itself oftentimes is not something that's really a part of the average person's life there. They wouldn't actually think of themselves as Christian or think of becoming Christian.
Right.
And the Catholics are really good at like process. So like if you're a Catholic, you do certain things over and over and over again in repetition to form a habit. That's intentional. They want you to have the habit of going to church, to have the habit of praying to God. Not because they think that that is the final goal that you should have, but because they think that there is both the faith in action and the faith in mind. And by having habits of like good habits of good faith, it makes it easier then to take that with the mind. This is why Protestants like to go with the Lord's Prayer so much, because it's this really good foundation for other prayers. But how are you going to build on that foundation if you don't know what it is? The Catholics take that farther with a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Part of that is going to church on Sunday. And so if you are Catholic, you'll go to church on Sunday, even if mentally you don't really go beyond that, but you're in the habit of it. This is what you've always done, and this is what you keep doing.
Right.
So it's a habit, but also
you'll go to confession at least once a year.
You'll go to confession. Right? Oftentimes more than once a year, and it'll be like a weekly thing. Yeah. And so I think in the context of that, you have these people that are in the habit of doing it, but also they're an adult, so it's a choice. Like, we choose our habits to a certain extent as adults. We can decide to create a new habit. That's the New Year's resolution you never do, and we can choose to remove a habit, which is sometimes also the New Year's resolution you never do.
Right.
So, for these people, they are in the habit of going to church, and they keep doing it, but also they're choosing to continue to do it. But also, in this circumstance, for them, the preacher is someone that actually cares about them intentionally goes out into the community to spend time with them. He doesn't just cloister himself away at the church.
Right.
And engages with them as real people. And then to have that mind behind it is so much worse, because it's like, I keep doing this every Sunday. I keep torturing myself by going to church and feeling convicted for what I'm doing. But yet I'm also not believing enough to really go in and do what this guy is telling me to do and live my faith, not just act my faith.
Yeah.
And yet I keep acting my faith, which continues to torture me that I'm not living my faith.
Yeah. So there's almost a lived dissonance between what they feel they need to do based off of the traditions that have been kind of supplanted in them, and then they supplanted the right word. I don't think that's the right word. Instilled. There we go. Instilled in them, and then the feelings of vice and consistent gratification of flesh, which you see all throughout this movie. I think this is one of the things that Christian movies in the Christian world do so poorly, is illustrating sin. And I think the reason that they do not go so far in illustrating sin is obvious, because they don't want people thinking about sin. They want it's kind of the Puritan conception of if you don't think about it, then it won't be a problem, right? Let's just keep this to ourselves. Problem with that is that then sin is never actually exposed to the light, and it can take hold, right? In the darkness, sin has a tendency to grow, and so this movie plays. It has no. It does not hold back from you the gravity of sin, and sin is so commonplace all throughout. It's not like there are a couple of sinners and they're the ones that get redeemed in the end, yay. It's not like they were bad, but now they're good, yay. That's the point of the movie. The whole movie, these people are showing their cards constantly about where they're at, and everybody's got some vice. And even I would say one of the most innocent characters, his daughter, is struggling with suicidal thoughts and kind of almost coming up. And again, sorry to if this is triggering to anybody, that's not my intention, but it is a major part, and I actually think a very impactful part of the movie. Is his daughter's struggle with any kind of reason for continuing her life. She doesn't seem to believe what her dad has been preaching this whole time. Doesn't seem to have a firm connection with faith. And it might have to do somewhat with her. So the priest, some of you might be thinking, priests can't be married. How did this, the priest was married early on, had his daughter, and then his wife died. And so then he went into to take up the cloth, but that was a secondary part of his life. And so there's kind of the background noise of could it be that this daughter has actually that part of the renunciation of faith for her, even if it's not explicit, is because of the deep trauma of losing her mom, right? Yes. But the whole time there's these dialogues between her and her dad where she is not naive, but she is attempting to almost come up with a reason for why she should not be alive anymore. She's trying, or maybe more the contrary, she's convinced herself that she shouldn't be alive and is looking for any last semblance of doubt that she should commit suicide. And the way you meet her is she meets up with her dad, and she's got her wrists bound up because it was a failed attempt. So
what's the joke he makes? Made the classic mistake.
Of a cross knot down. Yeah. So
which is a reoccurring gag with her through the whole movie. He's not the only one that says that.
Yes. So there's almost an understanding. He's by no means shocked at what's happened with her. So this has probably been an ongoing concern with her. It is so he has all these relationships in the town with all these different people, and all of them you could say that actually the beginning scene is a motif that continues on throughout the entirety of the film, in that everybody confesses, and like nobody feels any shame about what they're
like
doing.
Horns.
Was that?
It's kind of like Horns, if you remember that one. The chap that played Harry Potter, what's his name? Daniel Radcliffe?
Oh, Daniel Radcliffe. No, I haven't seen that one yet.
It was came in like a Wrecking Ball movie.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, he starts growing horns like a devil, and then like everyone starts confessing and like showing him all of the like evil things that they're wanting to do or are doing in the town.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
It's like a darkened version of this same concept, basically.
Got it. Yeah, every conversation that he has with the people, you could say the parishioners of this town, they're like, it's not even that they're like, Father, I've sinned. It's like just open sinning and like or open references to sins. Like there is no concern about it. And how do you feel about the priest's reaction to the people when they talk about their sin? Like that's an interesting element of this, right? Like how do you feel about meaning so the kind of the sense that I gathered from him is that he is not at all impressed or shocked by anything that the people are doing. And maybe part of that is because an active part of most Catholic faith expression is confession. Yeah. And so most priests are gonna hear about just about every sin under the sun regularly.
Well, provided their parishioners are being honest with them.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, in all of his interactions with these people, while they're like, there's one time where he goes to talk with the police chief, and the police chief has a male prostitute at his house, and like the male prostitute is talking about like trying to get the father to sleep with him, right? Like, right out in the open, and like the priest, he is not like there's no condemnation, like he doesn't even like almost respond to all of these horrible things. I mean, there's a woman that's doing cocaine throughout most of the show. There's his daughter who's just brazenly talking about how she doesn't want to be alive anymore, and like he just sits there and listens and almost doesn't show his hand for any of it. Yeah. Like, what was your sense about that? Do you feel like that?
I mean, I liked it. A lot of times I got the impression the reason people are being as honest with him is because they're trying to get a reaction. Yeah. They're expecting the Christian, oh my goodness, how dare you thing.
Right.
And they'd be satisfied if you reacted in that way. It's the fact that he doesn't give it any real like emotional weight.
Yeah.
That they end up giving up on it to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Because like he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Or he does. I mean, you can tell he's not necessarily happy that they're doing it.
Right.
But he's also not going to come be, bringing the fire and brimstone to that conversation because it's what they want.
Yeah. Yeah, he treats their sin, I think, the way that Jesus treats the sin of the people around him. Like, it is so similar in like the way that I read the Gospels, where for a great example is when he is being condemned, right? When he's at the when he's standing before the high priest, and there's all these people that are just openly lying about him and like trying to condemn him, and he just doesn't say anything. He just is sitting there and like watching it, unimpressed, right? Like and he answers. It's not like he's taken a vow of silence, right? Like Jesus does offer an answer occasionally, but it's never what the people want to hear, and it's never like a genuine reaction to what they've been saying. It's just kind of like he just speaks the truth. He's unencumbered in that way, right?
Yes.
He's deeply resolved to speak only what he thinks is necessary, and I think the Father shows that throughout most of this movie, which is, I think, one of the most brilliant parts of the movie, because
Yeah.
there's a sense in which there is no Pharisee in this man. Like he, the person that could have been the most Pharisaical of all the characters is the least Pharisaical, and is able to meet the people exactly where they're at with no judgment and no overreaction and no trying to keep himself from their sin, right? Like he endures it, and he's very much enmeshed in the life of this town. So yeah, I know I really loved that element, and I think that if we had Christian movies where the characters that are supposed to be the Christ figures exemplified that trait, I think we would be. I mean, I think it would help reconceptualize for the evangelical conscience what Jesus was like.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of issues with how we talk about this. First off, you kind of mentioned earlier the lack of sin in a lot of crash, or more, not that there isn't sin, but that the sin there doesn't make sense.
It's a caricaturization.
Yeah, it feels like someone tried to describe over the phone what sin was, and then that person wrote down the drawing of it, and then faxed it to someone across the world,
That's
and
great.
That's the result of
Yes.
And part
That's
of that
right.
is because we don't want to, give sin weight, but I think another part of it is, to a certain extent, especially in the American Christian community, we have insulated ourselves from sin to a certain extent, and so we're not as familiar with it.
Yeah.
It's attempting to remember what it was like, or to observe it in others without fully understanding it, and then trying to create a result of it.
Which, by the way,
Yeah.
is a hallmark of Pharisaism, right?
Yes.
I'm going to stay away from sinners so that I don't remind myself of what it's like to sin, or have any temptations or anything like that. Just stay far away. Yeah.
So that is, I think that's part of it. And the other part I totally spaced on.
Well, okay, so here's another thought that I had while you were talking. I think one of the things that could be said for the depiction of the priest is that the priest, would you describe the priest as nice?
No.
No. Not at all. No. He's not nice. He is... He looks frustrated to be almost everywhere he is. Everywhere throughout the movie, he's looking around at people with just this a great way to encapsulate this maybe is the words of Jesus, how long do I have to be with you people? Right? That, when he's he's talking to the disciples, and he's like, "How, you faithless generation, how long do I have to put up with you?" It is a very similar air that the priest has, where he feels unaffected by people's attempts to get him into the pot with them, right?
Yeah, with the possible exception of the lady whose husband dies. I think that's a moment where he's much
deeply
more relaxed in himself. Yeah.
Yes, deeply sentimental. That part is you see a different side of him in that moment.
Yep.
A deeply pastoral and sensitive side comes out of him. But in most cases, it almost is he responds to the hard-heartedness of everyone around him by almost callousing himself. He just kind of he just sits up straight, recognizes that there's very little that could be done to get these people to where they need to be. And he is not nice. He is not trying to save face. He is brutally honest with most of the people at some point, right? He does not betray himself as a people pleaser at all. Another element of him that I think is very Jesus-like, because you read the Gospels, and this good shepherd who's supposed to be the lovey-dovey, right? Everybody loves Jesus, right? You read some of the things he says, and you're like, wow, that's harsh. That is not, he did not sugarcoat that at all. And I think that's a good piece of this.
I think I remember the other point, which is, and this movie does it well too, he does break at the end because he isn't Christ, and so he does have imperfection, and so he ends up holding up the bar at gunpoint at one point.
That's right.
Because he's so pissed.
Yeah.
And frustrated and worried. It's what I think it's the next day that he's scheduled to die.
Right.
And Jesus has a strong emotional reaction to that inevitability too. But whereas Jesus is somewhat internal and it's him praying and crying. This guy gets a pistol and shoots up the local tavern.
Right.
And yells at people and also then kind of brutally honest in like a destructive way with those around him for a bit, right? Like the other priest at the church.
Yeah.
And that I think
that's
is
right.
intentional.
Yeah, doesn't he?
I forget exactly what insult it was, but it was so perfect.
Me neither. Yeah, I think it was something like, because he.
You should have been a lawyer or something like that.
Yeah, he says like this. So this priest that he works with, is like very much institutionalized. Like he's inset into the institution of the church, and so. At one point in the movie, the priest, his church is burnt down by the murderer, and there's that funny part at the end. His dog is killed.
Yeah.
And doesn't he say at the end, like the murderer is like.
I didn't kill your dog.
Yeah, I didn't kill your dog. Like I don't know. I would never do that. Like he has like some moral boundary. He's like, no, why would I kill your dog? That's terrible, right? As if that is just a funny element in itself because he starts the movie off by saying, "I'm going to kill an innocent priest," and then by the end he's like, "But I have moral standards. I'm not just going to kill your dog for no reason, right?" But the church gets burnt down, and in his conversation with the priest, like there's this moment where a very rich patron comes in and basically tries to buy forgiveness, and is like offering like a massive sum of money to start rebuilding, and the other priest is just like completely like, I mean, I don't know how to describe this. What would be a good term? Like caves to the monetary pressure almost immediately, right? Like wants to kind of wet his beak with what's going on there, and it's really gross to watch, right? Like it's a scene where you just basically watch this religious person lose all integrity, and yet in a way that's totally believable and like I've seen in the church before, right? Like this kind of double speak where we all know what the priest is actually after, right? But no one's saying it out loud, and so at the end, the father just like basically brutally insults this guy, and is like, I've never liked working with you, and like this is you're you have no integrity, right? It's
And then, at the end, the final shot of that guy is him reading the God Delusion.
Oh, really? I missed that part. Oh, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. When they
like pan through all the different people after he's been killed.
Yeah.
And they show it. Yeah, he's reading the God Delusion.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Oh man, yeah, because he's never really been. Yeah, he's never really following. So, I think I'm glad that you brought up the comparison because the movie's called Calvary. So like the whole week is, I think, supposed to mirror the life of Jesus the week before.
There are parallels.
Right, a lot of parallels. And this is a big one, is that the night before he is like supposed to die, he goes into a tavern, and you said shoots up the place. He does. He doesn't kill anybody or hurt anybody.
No.
I think he's getting threatened. Is that right? Or being made fun of by the other priests?
I can't.
Or not by the
priests,
but by
just
some
the usual thing that he's been dealing with the whole time. It's just en masse to a certain extent.
Yeah, and he like pulls. He's been holding a gun the whole time, which is, you could say, I think they needed to have that element in this movie. That the very beginning of this movie, he picks up a gun for some other parishioner of his that enjoys like collecting guns, and is like waiting to give it to him the whole time. But I think the brilliance of giving the priest a gun the whole time is there's the question the entire movie of, is he going to use it? Like, is he going to lose all integrity and use this gun to kill one of his parishioners? And he, in the end, he doesn't. I can't remember if he even brings the gun to the beach. I think he gets rid of it.
He does. He tosses it.
Yeah. So I think there's a like, had he not had that background, you could say that background power, the whole time you would have just been thinking like, what, like, this guy is, he has no virtue, he's just, being a coward, right? Like, he's, he's just letting somebody walk all over him. Like, the whole time, he could have done this. There are moments in the movie when, like, if you rewatch it, where he has the gun, like, concealed, and he's in the room with the guy that's going to kill him. Like, both of those realities are true.
So.
Yeah.
I think. I don't remember when he gets the gun. I thought it was kind of later in the movie.
I might be wrong on that, yeah. But anyhow, it doesn't take away from the power of that element of the movie. But yeah, so he has this, like, outburst at the very end. He's in this bar, and he's drinking, and you do get the Gethsemane vibes. Like, he's realizing the gravity of what's about to happen to him, and trying to figure out whether or not he can endure this. And the people upset him, and he gets up, aims the gun at them. Both of them are
that's
like,
what they do. They're saying to him, and these are two guys he's been, trying to help through the movie, and basically say that he's full of himself and lacks all humility and loves to just tell them what to do.
That's right.
I don't think he's actually full on told anyone what to do.
No.
Movie.
It's complete mischaracterization.
And he needs to get taken down a peg, and then he's like, okay, well, take me down. He pulls out the pistol.
Yeah.
And holds it at them.
Yeah. So it's that moment. Like, you're right. I think this is an element of, like, it's trying to show that the priest is still human. And still sinful. But he never does anything necessary. I mean, like, he breaks some bottles of booze, but other than that, he's almost harmless, right? He puts away the gun.
He empties the whole he empties the barrels, and then, like, continues to pull the trigger at them, knowing that he's out of bullets.
Right.
Almost symbolically.
Yeah, and so the other like, I think, big tie-in to Holy Week that this movie has is, doesn't he give communion right before, like, it shows, it has that, it's kind of a passing shot, but it's him at the church giving the communion bread to his parish, and
that's
it shows them.
No, that's at the beginning.
Is it? Shoot, I'm misremembering.
They do that
again.
shot at the beginning because it's also supposed to be kind of like a fun thing of which one of these people did it, because you get to hear each of them say amen in turn. So you've heard the voice of the person, not seeing them, and then they basically parade the different characters that you're going to be with through the story.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that you can be like, oh, is that the voice? Is that the voice? I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's a mystery for you. But that you're tormented, that's a mystery because you feel like you should know.
But that's a close parallel to the Last Supper, because Jesus is giving the bread to the people, and one of them would kill him, right?
Yes.
One of them is going to kill him.
And he knows it, and that is right at the start. That's where it is.
Yeah.
It starts basically with the Last Supper.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool moment.
You could I guess you could make the argument that in essence this movie is like the night of the Last Supper and Jesus's execution, put through the span of a week instead.
Yes.
It's kind of
that's a good way of saying it.
Into a week.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I think this movie is gonna be up there in some of my favorites that have been produced in an attempt to, like, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to call it a Christian movie, because I don't know that it was made by Christians, but I think it was I think it's more Christian than most Christian movies are, right? Like
Yes.
it's
Absolutely.
more willing to deal with the deep realities of sin and the moral ambiguities of life and the deep questions than most Christian movies are willing to, which I find is consistently the case. But that's fine. That's fine. But one day, maybe the church will wake up.
Fine.
That's fine. Cries, like a tear rolling down my cheek. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Any last notes on this movie before we close?
I don't know. I mean, there's so it's this isn't a movie where there's like, you have this underlining tension of him being killed at the end of the week, but that it's not the focus for him really, and so
No.
it's not the focus of the movie.
No.
And I think because of that, it's I did briefly look at my essay. I looked at a totally different thing with this movie when I watched it for college than most of what we've been talking about here. And I think that's one of the strengths of this movie, is that there's so many like parallel little mini stories of all these different characters and their interaction with him that to a certain extent the underlying plot isn't as important. And it's about the journey, not the destination, sort of a thing.
Yes.
But the destination is still, it's a heck of a thing, and you definitely remember it. But that's one of the great things of this movie, is that you can watch it and you can take away so many different little nuggets of truth that are throughout the whole of it. And so it's worth a watch, really. There's no way to... It's fun to discuss, and you can kind of just keep discussing forever, because it is one of these movies that has so much depth in each moment that it gives you. So
it does.
Give it a watch.
Yeah. As a last little remembering here, and then I want to ask one other question. There's one little thing I remember. Remember when he goes to I can't remember if I think he's just doing like a kind of almost like a chaplaincy call to the guy who was their local serial killer. Like the guy serial killer meaning he had killed like a couple of people, right? It wasn't like he had killed like 90 people. He killed like 4. But he was definitely insane. He wasn't well. And he was kind of pleading like that they hadn't found the last body. And so they were pleading with him to like tell them where the last body was so they could go give a proper burial. And he was like, I genuinely just forgot. Like, I can't remember where I buried the last body.
I don't know.
And there's a reaction that's given to the priest for even going and visiting this guy. That I think it is maybe a good like capstone or like a little nugget to take away from the movie. There's these people that are like, I can't remember who it is but I remember he gets condemned. But every character in the movie has like this deep moral flaw right in them that they're almost unwilling to acknowledge that is a moral flaw, right? They're kind of just living in it, and there is a wondering, right, that comes up against that stoic nature of the priest, right? But they're criticizing him for having gone in and given this man an audience at all. And it becomes so clear, like the heart of Jesus in that, right? Like I've come not for the healthy but for the sick is like, maybe this man's motto. Where people are sick and they're unwilling to recognize that, he is like, he has no patience. And that's Jesus, right? Like the people he was staying away from, that he was confronting and like arguing with and creating tussles with, were always the people that thought they were fine. Like they were sinning, but not in ways that mattered, right? And and this man who you can tell is like deeply broken and like in a weird way, like in an almost bipolar way, really wants to be healed and wants to be forgiven and wants to like he wants to clear his name of this sin and be healed. The one person in the movie who genuinely wants to be forgiven and find resolution, they're criticizing him for having gone to. And so like that I think is a like a good little nugget to remember from this movie. And then my question would be, what do you think the point of this movie is? Like, what did you walk away? I mean, like, there's so many little things to take away from it, but overall, what's the movie about? Like, what is it telling you?
I feel like it's a modern parable of Jesus to a certain extent.
Yeah.
That's sort of I think of this movie as people don't always find the story of Jesus super relatable in the modern day because one, the reality of the sort of world we live in, you know, the rules of engagement, the way people talk and act is drastically different.
Yeah.
And two, we exist in a world that has had 2,000 years nearly of Christianity and Christian thinking and conversation. And so to just focus on this one bit without then, you know, thinking and talking and acknowledging the, you know, 1,000+ years of the Spirit working in the church and also the church existing in the world makes it feel somewhat disconnected from where we are in the conversation now. Because, of course, Jesus himself says that you all will do greater works than even these, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like, the church is a part of this. And so that's the start. But we're a ways from the start of the beginning of the end, as it were, right? So this movie is attempting to tackle both of those things and sort of retell the story of Christ without it being the story of Christ in the context of the history of the church and the modern world juxtaposed with the ancient one. And that's, I think, why it's a good movie.
Yeah.
For believers and non-believers, because it's really good at having that discussion.
Yeah. I think if you were to maybe like put it in a sentence, it's the message is maybe something like love suffers all things, right? Like,
ooh, that's good.
Because I think that is the element of this movie that persists. The father never necessarily like gives in to the constant jeering. Besides that one scene, right? The constant jeering, the like. I mean, he basically is mocked for being a priest. Religion is mocked the entire movie, constantly, by everybody, right? And that's part of just, you know, when a culture has adopted any kind of, you could say, like a common, what would you say, like a common structure, a common narrative, a common, like moral ordering. The power, especially if that moral ordering is the church, the gospel then becomes it's not able to inbreak in the same way because the soil gets hardened, right? Because that's the natural. So I think the result of that is what you see in this priest's life, this constant jeering and constant mocking of the faith and of what he stands for, and a constant imposition of sin in on him, and him having to almost live through these people's sin and rejection of the thing that he holds most dear, and like even the people that were supposed to be on his side basically caving to the pressure of sin. And I think that is trying to teach us that like it's almost giving us, like you said, a picture of what it would mean to live like Jesus now, suffering all things for the sake of love, right? And that's what this man does. He, in a sense, and here's another element that connects to the story of Jesus. He atones for the sin of another, because the priest that molests this guy in the very beginning, which they don't show any of that, but they go into some deep detail about like what happened, some very uncomfortable detail. Jesus, that's funny, I called him Jesus. That's hilarious. The priest, he expiates that sin by taking the killing. This man kills him, and is very clear that the reason he's killing him is because it has some sort of like vengeful retribution that satisfies the sin that he himself had been taking on so often in his youth. And so I think there's that element too, that where like there's the atonement. He atones for this other priest's sin, and does so without raising a like any kind of condemnation. He never condemns that priest. He never says like, that priest was a terrible person for having molested you. He just takes the punishment silently. So yeah, I think love suffers all things. And I'm looking right now at this picture that I have on my wall of the crucified Jesus that I think is like, I think that it resonates. There's a same heartbeat there in this movie.
Interestingly, the Catholic Church, to my knowledge, has never proclaimed a single person as having gone to hell. They've certainly proclaimed a number of people as being saints in heaven, but they haven't said a single person is guaranteed in hell. Yeah,
because there's kind of the unspoken connection between excommunication, or like being outside the church, and being unable to be saved, but they never articulate that as this individual in particular is going to be. That's a good and that kind of goes back to that Augustine quote in the very beginning. Say it again. What was it again?
Well, I'm not sure we actually said it on the pod. Do not despair, one of the thieves was saved. Do not presume, one of the thieves was damned.
Yeah. And that from Augustine, too, who's like, can be a little rough around the edges. Yeah, that's good. Well, I think we should maybe close it there. I think that's a good way to close it. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of Sophomoros. If you'd like to reach out, you can reach out to us at sophomorosofficial@gmail.com. That's SOPHOMOROS official@gmail.com. We always would love to hear from you, and as always, may Christ be exalted.
Boom. And next time we're doing what?